Welcome to Spoken or Written Speech Insight with AI and Azure Cognitive Services. Today, we are excited to have Catalin Popa, an Azure Microsoft MVP and the brains behind Adaptive.Run. Catalin is at the forefront of application development and cloud computing, helping organizations worldwide embrace digital transformation through Azure. His deep dive into artificial intelligence and machine learning within Azure Technologies has positioned his company, Adaptive.Run, as a leader in innovative cloud solutions. Get ready for an innovative session on leveraging AI and Azure Cognitive Services for speech analysis. Let's welcome Kathleen. Kathleen, you can proceed now.
Thank you for that. Thank you for the warm welcome and the warm introduction. And yes, for the next 50 minutes, I'm gonna explain you a bit how you can use Azure Cognitive Services in Azure, and we will build a simple application that will make use of these, let's say, ready-to-use tools that we have in Azure regarding artificial intelligence and machine learning. But before that, as you can probably see, I only have 4 slides. The reason why I have only 4 slides is because this session will be an interactive one. So we're gonna build something in Azure. We're gonna build an application. It's gonna be kind of a little demo. So I think it will be a pretty interesting session. So bear with me for the next 50 minutes.
Sure.
As already mentioned, you've probably seen my name already. I'm a Microsoft MVP. I'll skip the introductions because it was already a great introduction that was made on my behalf. And to get straight in the subject, this is what we're basically going to build. This is kind of a really high level, let's say, diagram that will demonstrate our application. We're going to have a simple console app. I'm going to demonstrate it to you in just a second, in which we will speak basically to the laptop, and will interact with the application, and then we will extract the speech, transform it into text, and then based on that text, we will extract some key phrases, and we will do sentiment analysis. So that will basically be it. Let me show you also how it looks like the end product, because you're probably wondering what we're going to build. So in the next 50 minutes, we're going to build this simple application, which kind of asks you in what language do you want to speak. And I'm going to choose English just for the sake of the demonstration, right? And then after I hit enter, I will speak something in English, and you will see that my text will be recorded, and then it will be analyzed. So it kind of goes like this. This is a text to see if the application actually works. As you can see, the speech-to-text transformation actually works, right? So it basically transforms what they've just spoken into text. And then it says, okay, what you've just spoken is kind of a neutral score, and you've probably spoken about some text and some application, right? So this is what we're going to build. Bear with me, it's going to be pretty interactive. Let's see how we can do that, right? So first things first, I'm going to open a bit the Azure portal, in which I already have a resource group. And here in Azure, I will create a simple resource, which is called Cognitive Service. This one, Azure AI Services, it has been rebranded. Okay, and I'm just going to go quickly through it. It's nothing complicated in creating a resource. Whoever worked with Azure probably knows that it's kind of a next kind of situation in which you can build a resource, right? Let's add a name for it. Let's name it Text A Pakistan. Let's see if, okay, cool. Add the pricing tier as well. It's only one. And then let's go directly to review and create. I'm not going through the whole details because, as I said, the resource is pretty simple. I'm going to give you an overview of the resource as well for those who are not that familiar with Azure and with cognitive services in Azure. But basically what you're seeing here is a multi-service account that we have for Azure AI. And basically through this account, you can make use of the predefined artificial intelligence that has been trained by Microsoft, and you can use basically via API requests. So when you're building this resource, well, what you're going to get is basically some keys and an endpoint, which will be basically the things that you need to use to actually make use of this cognitive service, this artificial intelligence. The best way on how you can actually understand how artificial intelligence and how cognitive services actually work in Azure is if you go through this portal that Microsoft has, which is called the Dev Cognitive Portal. And here, this is kind of just let's say, a dirty little helper, if you want to call it like that, in which you can find all of the APIs that basically this service that I just created here. You can find all of the APIs that you can use, right, from an artificial intelligence perspective, and also how to use them. So, for example, if I go to, let's say, computer vision, just for the sake of it, right, I can see different versions, of course. And if I go, for example, on version 3.1, you can see here that I have a lot of APIs that I can actually use to do certain stuff with my resource. And you have here the whole all the details. What you can do with the actual API, how you can make the URL request, what the request body needs to contain, even at a certain point, of course, some code samples that you can use and so on and so forth, right? So this resource right here, just as I said, it's basically a wrapper, a one for all wrapper for all of the APIs that you're seeing into this API library right here. But for our example, of course, we're not going to use all the APIs. We're going to just use the speech API, right? One of these ones, and the speech to text at a certain point, and the text analytics as well, right? But keep in mind that, as I said, it's kind of a one for all, and all of the things that you need, and you'll see also in our application, it's basically to know these details right here: the endpoint, the region, and of course the keys. Other than that, there's nothing much to the resource itself. It's ready to use and ready to consume. That being said, let's actually open Visual Studio, right? And we're going to create a project from the start, right? We're going to create a blank project. Let's create a console project. Right, let's name it a right. I'm going to use .NET 8 just for the sake of it. It can be any framework. The application is pretty simple, so don't concentrate too much on the details because they're not that relevant. You'll see that basically the most important part here is how we integrate the Azure part, right? And you'll see that we will do that through SDKs, and how we consume the actual resource that is just in Azure through code. So that will be probably the most interesting part for you guys, because basically you will see that with this resource, you can easily have AI capabilities in any application. It can be a simple console app as we're building right here. It can be some fancy portal that you have, you name it, right? At the end of the day, what we are going to do is to make API requests towards that resource that I built in Azure. And through API requests, we're basically going to make use of artificial intelligence. That's basically what's going to happen, right? But before that, just to make my life a bit easier and yours as well, let's install some NuGet packages. And the NuGet packages that we're going to use today are one that is called Microsoft Cognitive Services Speech. This one by Microsoft. So let's install this. Takes about a minute, bear with me. Okay. And let's do also Azure AI Text Analytics. This one as well, right? It's always good to look for them, the ones that are actually published by Microsoft, the official ones, of course. So let's do that as well. And now we should have 2 SDK installs. Well, cool. So now that we have these SDKs, it will be easier for us to consume the actual APIs because, as I've mentioned in here, you have different ways in which you can consume these APIs for artificial intelligence. You can either do literally an API request, and you can do it, or, of course, if you want to use the SDKs in Visual Studio, you can actually do that and make use of some predefined functions that Visual Studio and Microsoft actually offers you, right? So we're going to do just that. So let's go back to our application. And in our application, let's build a namespace first. Let's also define some libraries. First of all, right? And here we will define also a class. And in this class, first, the most important part, don't do this at home. So this is only for demo reasons, keep in mind. But the first thing that I will want to do, just so that you can understand exactly what we are using from an Azure perspective, I'm gonna define a variable, which I will call it Azure key credentials. And here I will create this credential, which will basically contain the value that I've just built into Azure, right? So here from my resource, which is called Text Aid Pakistan, right? The cognitive service, I'm going to take this key. And in here, I'm going to put this key. Again, keep in mind, I'm just doing it for demo reasons. It's probably best that you can secure them and you do not hard code them as I'm doing it here. But I'm just doing it so that we can understand how it actually works, right? So bear with me, please. Let's also close these just for the sake. Yeah. And I'm going to do one more, which I'm going to define it as a URI. And I'm going to call it endpoint. And this one will be a new URI, which will contain this value, right? The actual endpoint to which we will make the API requests, right? So let's paste that here. And we're set to go. Basically, we're going to make use of these as we go on, right? Now, after I have these defined, let's also define a task, static asynchronous task make. And here we're going to build something really simple. Let's do the following. So for that, let's actually going to copy it from the actual application and we're going to explain it, right? So we're going to do the following. We're going to write some lines, which will basically be my menu when I first start the application, right? So my application, when we'll first execute, will write basically in the console some options that I will have at my disposal. Either English, either French, Spanish, German, Romanian. Let's just do three of them just for the sake of explaining it easier, right? Let's do French, English, and Spanish, right? And then basically my application will tell me, hey, please choose a language that you will use. And it will basically wait for my input so that it can know what I'm actually using. If it's one, it's English. If it's two, it's French. If it's three, it's Spanish, right? Then based on that, I will basically execute something, right? And I will make use of the artificial intelligence. And just to have also the decision as well. Sorry, here, right? It will basically be something like this, right? In which if it's one, I will go and I execute a function which is called at the moment recognize speech async. I don't have it defined, but we will define it in just a second, right? If it's two, it will do the same thing, but for French. If it's three, it will do the same thing for Spanish, right? The reason why I'm doing it like this, I know I'm repeating code, but the reason I'm doing it like this is to make it easier to understand from a demo perspective what will be the differences between these functions, right? So, of course, you can probably organize your code to be more efficient, but the reason why I'm doing it, as I said in this demo, like this, is because I want to demonstrate to you that the difference between changing languages, it's literally just one line at a certain point into the code, and how you can easily decide it. So let's define that function actually now. Give me 1 second. It will be easier for you guys to understand. Here it is, right? Let me copy it. Probably easier if we go through it like that. And then we will explain what's basically happening in here, right? So here it is, right? In which I've defined this function, which is called recognize speech asynchronous English, right? And here in this recognize speech asynchronous English, you'll see that first I'm defining a config from the SDK that we just installed 10 minutes ago, right? And I'm gonna define a config which will make use of this speech configuration so that I can actually transform my speech into text, right? The first part of the application. And here into this speech config, I will have to input again my values that I have from Azure, right? So I will actually make use of these keys again. I can use the same, of course, the same credentials that I have in here, but I've actually defined those for other functions. So you'll see as we go along. And the things that we need to define here are basically the key, right, that we're going to use, and the region in which my resource has been built. So this West Europe, right? Then, based on this speech config, I'm going to use this function from the SDK, which is basically called speech recognizer, in which actually does the speech to text function that I have, right? And then based on the result, I'm literally outputting what has been transmitted by the artificial intelligence, right? So it awaits for a result, and then once the result it's basically transmitted, right? I'm literally just outputting the result in case it's no error, because if I do encounter some errors, of course, I have these other cases in which I will output something like speech could not be recognized, or it was canceled for some reason, or so on and so forth. But it's basically, yeah, just a simple, as I said, just a simple function which makes use of this artificial intelligence, right? This cognitive service account that I have in Azure. And then based on the keys that I have in there, I'm literally sending to this speech recognizer function. I'm sending my speech, right? I'm sending my audio, and then I get back from the artificial intelligence, I get back basically the speech to text, right? The results from the text. And we're going to do the same thing for French as well, right? So keep in mind that this is for English, right? And the reason why I'm mentioning this is because you'll see that for the French one, it's a small difference that will be in the actual code. So let me copy the code for French as well. And this is the one for French. And the only difference that you will see right here, that's the reason, as I said, why I'm actually doing two different functions in here, is for you to demonstrate how easy it is to actually define the language, right? So here I'm doing English, and you can see that I'm not actually inputting anything like this from a language perspective. I'm not inputting any specific parameter that specifies English, because English is by default. But when it comes to other languages, the only thing that you need to do is that in this speech recognizer function that you're using here to actually translate, you have to specify the language code at a certain point. And for French, it's FR, right? But basically, based on this, you're telling the artificial intelligence, hey, I'm going to speak in this language, which has this code, right? And then the artificial intelligence will say, okay, you're now speaking in French, so I'm going to do speech to text in the French language, right? That's the only difference. Other than that, as you can see, it's the same as from a code perspective. Literally, I'm just doing a speech config, right? And then based on that config, I'm sending this parameter to this magic function that the SDK offers me, right? The speech recognizer, and then I'm getting the response back. So they're basically the same. And because we've done French as well, let's do also Spanish for the sake of the demo, in which this function will look exactly the same, right? So recognize speech, but in Spanish this time, another language code, which for Spanish is ES, right? And then basically, based on the result that I have right here, we're going, and of course, we're parsing the result. Either we're outputting the result, either we're, of course, outputting some error in case something unexpected happens, right? But let's copy the code as well over here. Let's put the correct code in here, right? And that's basically it for the moment. So the first part, right? If we go back to our, let's say, small diagram, basically what we've implemented so far is just this part right here, in which somebody speaks, and then based on that of what has been spoken, we're transforming that into text, right? So this is basically the code that we've done so far. Let's actually give it a go, see how it works. Okay, so it asks me, hey, what do you want to choose? English, French, Spanish, whatever. Let's do English. And then after I hit enter, I will speak something to see if the actual speech to text actually works, right? This is a first test to see if the console application works. Okay, so you can see that the speech to text transformation actually worked. Basically, what I've inputted as audio is now basically into text, right? So the first part, that's kind of it. And you can see the, let's say, how easy it is to actually make use of that, right? As I said, basically, I have just one simple function, and I'm making use of my resource that I have in Azure. I'm literally defining a config, and then based on that config, I'm using a function, which is by default the speech recognizer in this case, right? And then I get the result. That's it, end of story. So literally almost an API request if you want to put it like that, right? But with the help of SDK, as you can see, it's just a few lines, tend to be more precise, right? In which you can do this simple, let's say, integration of artificial intelligence. Okay, let's go forward because this is just one part of the application, right? Uh, as we said, right, after we do speech to text, we also want to do some text analytics, right? So I'm going to go back into my main task, right, where I basically have my console application. And after we do speech to text, I am going to basically create a new client, which will make use of these credentials that I defined earlier, right? So this credential is this endpoint. I'm gonna create a new client, but this time for the function which is called text analytics client, right? Because basically this will be the client that I'm going to use to do sentiment analysis. If you remember when we first demonstrated the application will also have this function in which we'll look at the text and we'll say, hey, you're speaking in a negative mode or a positive mode or a neutral mode, right? We're going to do the same thing here as well. Pretty simplistic from a dev perspective, but again, it's only for demo reasons, in which based on that client variable that I have, and based on of what I'm inputting from a console perspective, right? If it's 1, 2, or 3, I'm going to do I'm going to execute another function. This time I'm calling it sentiment analysis example. Again, one for English, one for French, one for Spanish, just to demonstrate the difference between them, right? And these ones this time look like this. Give me 1 second. Let's define a new function right here, in which this sentiment analysis makes use of that client that I just defined earlier, right? So this one that it's using the endpoint of the credentials. So the reference that I have back in Azure to my cognitive service, right? And of course, I'm also sending to the function the text that I want to analyze, right? So if you remember this input text, in my case, it will be this text one, which is basically the speech to text transformation that I'm doing at the earlier stage, right? So here I'm basically getting the text. And then once I have the text, I'm sending it for sentiment analysis, right? Then in the function, as you can see, I'm using this function, which is called analyze sentiment, which is also part of one of the SDKs that we installed earlier, right? And then with this simple line, because it's literally not more than just one line, right? I'm getting the sentiment, and based on the result in here, I'm of course outputting the result. The sentiment, then the confidence scores that we have from the API, right? If it's positive, it's negative. If it's neutral, right? It's basically an API request, as I said, that the SDK does, and then based on that result that I get in here in this variable called document sentiment, I'm basically outputting parsing the result, right? As you can see, I'm not doing any language specifications in here because as we had for the speech part, it's the same idea for sentiment analysis as well. By default, it's English, but if you want to do it in other languages, At the end of the day, the only difference will be that into this function, you'll have to specify the language code, right? So for the French one, it will be FR again, right? So as you can see, no difference between the code. And then for Spanish, of course, it will be the same thing, but ES, right? So in here. Right. So now I have three functions. Basically, my application, technically, my console app will do the following thing: do speech to text in here, and then based on based on the text that I have from speech to text, I will send it for sentiment analysis to see if it's in a positive manner, negative manner, and so on. So let's give that a go. See if it works. Right. Again, English, French, Spanish. I'm gonna speak something. Today is a beautiful day. Okay. And my speech to text works, right? We've kind of demonstrated that earlier, but now also my document sentiment analysis also works as well, right? As you can see, because I'm speaking about a beautiful day, it's kind of in a positive manner, right? I have an 87% positive score, neutral about 12%, right? And basically the overall sentiment of what I've just said, it's pretty positive, right? Works the same for negative things. Let's also demonstrate something negative. Let me think of a sentence that will be a negative one.
Just a question, Catalin.
Yes, please.
Um, I'm just like sort of intrigued by this. This is interesting. I was just thinking, is it possible if I mean, does that have the capacity to sort of have more complex sentiment analysis, or is it more like sort of like positive and neutral? Does that have like many other categories, or is that like
For the moment,
just,
by default, it's just positive, negative, and neutral. So that's by
okay?
default, the one that you can use from Azure. But you can do more complex stuff if you train your own cognitive service, right? So what I'm
Mm-hmm.
using here, it's literally the things that you have uh, from the shelf by Microsoft. You create this account, you use it,
Okay.
that's it, you code it, right? But Microsoft also has something which is called custom AI at a certain point, in which you can train kind of your own AI, sort of. I mean, you can't do everything, but you can customize some things, and then you can do more complex stuff based on even on speech to text and on sentiment analysis as well. But I promise that I'll demonstrate you guys that into a different session at a later stage.
So there seems to be like bunch of
Mhm.
other complex models. Are there, or you can like we can give it like we can train it based on different speed, like different kind of speech, or
Yeah.
like wherever. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. There are different models, and at a certain point, the newer models can actually let you know what's the tone in which you're actually in which you're actually speaking, if it's witty
Mm-hmm.
or if it's sarcastic or if it's whatever, right? But those are a bit more complex. The ones that we're using here, it's literally the off the shelf, as I said, the standard one that Microsoft offers, and basically says, okay, positive, neutral, negative. That's about it, right?
Okay, and does that do we get to see, do we get to save the text, the speech to text data in any other repository so that we can use it for reporting, or you know for the sentiment analysis? Let's say for example, if we are at an event, and if there's like bunch of other keynotes or speeches, is there a
Mhm.
way we could save that in, like in a table so that we could use that for further reporting, uh,
That's
would that be?
that's up to you. That's up to you on how you get on how you store the data, right? So
Mm,
basically, Microsoft comes and said, "Look, use this service. It's an API. We give you the result, and then how you store it. If you store it in a table, and if you want to do it for
mhm.
reporting reasons or whatever, analysis reasons, up to you how to do that, right? But it doesn't store it by default. So by default, it's literally just an
Okay.
API request, which it says, yeah, you've gave me this text. I've analyzed it. It's positive, neutral, negative, whatever. Do whatever you want to do with the information. So up to you on how you build.
Cool. Cool. Thanks.
No worries. So now let's say something negative. Today I am sad because my car broke. Presumably that's sad. Let's see. Yeah, okay, it's a pretty negative thing. Okay, so as you can see, yeah, kind of gets the text. It sees that I'm probably saying something a bit sad or negative, and it will say, hey, it's 99% negative. It's that's the analysis that we're doing, right? So again, while I'm demonstrating here, as I said, it's pretty simple. It's just the introduction of the speech and text and analytics components that Microsoft has. But keep in mind that if you want to do more complex stuff, for sure, if you deep dive into the subject, you can actually do those. Microsoft offers you the building blocks if you want to put it like that, and then it's up to you on how you use them and how you want to configure them afterwards. So cool. We've done recognized speech, we've done sentiment analysis. There's one more thing that we need to do for application, right? Because we also want to extract key phrases, right? So you've probably seen that when I'm speaking, it makes the transformation, right? Speech to text. It makes also the sentiment analysis. But we had also that part in which we're literally extracting the, let's say, important subjects from what I'm speaking. Like, for example, I know the main entities, which is usually pretty useful. I'm going to also give you some real life examples in which these things are kind of used in just a second, right? But it's pretty useful if you want at a certain point to analyze, let's say, a big text. Let's say you want to analyze a text which has 500 words at a certain point. This key phrase extraction, it's pretty useful because it will literally immediately tell you that that whole text, it's about, I know, a book, or it's about a car, or it's about a city, Paris, and so on and so forth, right? So it kind of gives you some labels in which you can put the text directly to know what subject are being discussed at a certain point. But probably easier for you guys to understand if we actually demonstrate it from a code perspective. So we're going to do the same thing. Sorry for that. After we do in our main console application, after we do sentiment analysis, we're going to do 3 more functions into the same manner, which based on, of course, on what I'm inputting, I will do key phrase extraction for French, and key phrase extraction for Spanish. Right, and then again, into the same manner as you've probably already been used to so far, we're going to build another function, pretty simple, which again gets as input, right, the text that I have from text to speech, and then the client that I'm defining earlier, the client being basically the credentials from this resource that I have to measure, right? And the function, exactly like the other ones, makes use of a function named extract key phrases, which is from the SDK that we installed, right? We're inputting the text, and then basically the Microsoft resource, the cognitive service, will come back with us with a response in which we'll say, hey, the key phrases from that text that you just sent to me to be analyzed are these responses that I have right here, each key phrase in the response, right? Also for French, you can probably guess it by now. The only difference is that into that main function that I'm calling, I'm going to specify the language, right? And we're going to demonstrate French and Spanish as well. I'm not that well versed in those languages, but I can probably speak a sentence just to demonstrate it. And again, for Spanish, as you can see, I'm specifying Spanish, and that's it. And the reason why I'm specifying these languages right here, because I'm gonna, after we finish with the application, I'm gonna show you also the all the languages that are being supported, right? So there are about 180 languages, as far as I remember, that are being supported by this resource specifically for speech to text and for the other functions that we're using, right? So you can even see languages that are not that, I know, let's say that popular, right? You can even see Romanian, my local language, which is just spoken by, I know, 20 million people in the world, which is pretty low as a number, right? So yeah, any language that you can think of, I'm pretty sure that the resources will support. But we'll have a look on that in just 1 second. So let's finish with the application first. We have these. Let's give it one more run. This is the third run to demonstrate the full application. And speech to text, comes the sentiment analysis as well. And then, as you can see, now we have key phrases as well, in which basically the artificial intelligence is telling me, hey, you're speaking about some third run and you're speaking about some full application, right? The key phrases might not be that relevant because I'm just having one sentence in here, but if you're speaking probably for a long time, it will kind of make you a great summary from an entity perspective, right? Those are really helpful to make you understand what is actually being talked about and what's actually being analyzed, right? And I can give you some real life examples. This is actually what you're seeing here. It's a very primitive solution of what has been implemented for a bank here in Romania, but of course, with all the bells and whistles and from a more complex perspective, but think it from a customer service perspective. So the bank that I'm telling you about implemented a similar solution in which they are doing speech to text first of all for all the calls that they receive in the call center, right? So a customer calls in the call center, and you know how it is when you're calling the bank basically is telling you that this phone call will be recorded and so on and so forth, right? After it's being recorded, it's being sent to a solution like this, of course, more complex. And basically all of the whole conversation from the call is being converted into text, right? Then that text is being analyzed and and are extracted key phrases, and those key phrases are basically used as labels into a database, so that if somebody at a certain point wants to see all the conversations from, I know, last Wednesday that have been about the subject of losing money or whatever, right? Now you can easily do that, right? Because you've done speech to text. So you basically have the conversations in text. And then when you extracted the key phrases, you can basically identify really easily based on key phrases that, I know, though some of those conversations that you had were about losing money or about, I know, high commissions or whatever, right? And then further on, of course, after these are done, they also do some kind of sentiment analysis as well. But it's let's say, a semi-automated process in the sense that on the text that they are converting from the actual phone conversations, right? They're doing this sentiment analysis in which they're putting a score on it. If it's positive, if it's negative, if it's neutral, right? And then if the threshold of negative goes above 25%, then some escalation manager, I don't know what's the name of the actual position, right? Some other guy basically hears again the recording to see if the customer service part has been done properly, right? So from a quality perspective, to see what went wrong, what went bad with the actual agent from the customer service and so on and so forth. So what I'm trying to say is that it's not replacing jobs AI, right? At the end of the day, you can see that all of these simple capabilities that are demonstrated here can be easily integrated into business to help, I don't know, do things faster or do things more efficient or do things more organized, right? And I've given you guys this example of the bank because that is doing this for their customer support service, right? Because it's a pretty cool example from my perspective from one of the customers that we have, right? Which are actually making use of these ones, right? So they're not fully automating everything, but as I said, it's a pretty cool help that they get from artificial intelligence, in which they can now easily identify what recordings or what phone calls they had last week, which were about a certain subject, or I don't know, what phone calls may have gotten in a negative manner, and they can analyze them further to improve customer service and so on and so forth, right? So it can be in all sorts of.
Just a question.
Yeah.
Besides banking, any other industry are you specifically sort of targeting, or is it something? Are you working in any other industries
Insurance,
besides
mostly.
banking? Okay, okay. And
Yeah.
these are mainly call centers, right? Call center or
Yeah.
okay, okay,
So
interesting.
from a speech perspective, yeah, usually the customers that we have for the speech capabilities are usually either banks or insurance and call
Okay,
centers mostly, right? Because
Okay.
they need to do this kind of indexing of their phone calls and recordings so that they can, of course, analyze it better. And that's kind of the perfect match. Other than that,
And also in terms of, let's say, sentiment analysis, what seems to be like, has there been any benchmarks in terms of measuring positive or negative sentiment? Has there been any like sort of reporting impact? So like, has there been any KPIs that you've sort of worked on, or like sort of,
they
let's say, if there is a recommendation, you tweak, yeah, you sort of tweak the that benchmark of positive and negative sentiment, and then that gives you a bit more specific results in terms of, like, say, there's a specific kind of speech.
there are some, let's say,
Hmm.
rules that we usually offer to the customers so that they can have better results or more, let's say, accurate results, right? Because you've probably seen from my application right here, if I'm just speaking one sentence, oh, well, okay, I'm going to do some sentiment analysis, but it's not going to be on point, right? So usually when we go and recommend and implement these kind of solutions, we recommend them, hey, if you're doing sentiment analysis, be sure to, I know, at least have a conversation of 20 seconds or 30 seconds so that the sentiment analysis can actually analyze more data. Because the more sentences and the more words you have, right, into a text at the end of the day, of course, the more accurate the sentiment analysis will be, right? But in terms of benchmarks, it really depends from industry to industry. I'm going to be honest with you. I've given you the example of that bank in which they do sentiment analysis, and if they go over 25% negative on a certain text that they have on a certain phone call, right, then they send it to somebody from an escalation perspective to analyze it to see what happens, right? For them, it's 25%. For some other guys in insurance, for some other company in insurance, those guys do it over 40%. So it's kind of up to them on how they want to do it, right? From a, let's say, KPI perspective and how they want to juggle. But we also do this disclaimer in which you might end up with a false positive. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It actually happens from time to time because at the end of the day, it's artificial intelligence and it's not perfect, right? You might have at a certain point, I know, certain cases in which you will have a phone call, you will transform it speech to text, you will send that text to sentiment analysis. Sentiment analysis will come back and it will say, hey, it's 30% negative or it's, I know, 80% positive, and it might be the other way around. And usually what this happens when you're seeing sarcastic conversations. And I can probably demonstrate it to you guys as well, right? Because at the end of the day, we're talking about, of course, artificial intelligence, but it doesn't really get sarcasm at a certain point. So I'll give you an example. I'm going to say in a sarcastic manner something in English, right? And you'll see that although it's, of course, in a negative tone because I'm saying something sarcastic, the artificial intelligence will basically say, hey, it's actually pretty positive, right? So look, yeah, it's a beautiful day today because I just lost all my money. What cannot be better other than having this beautiful day? Something like that, right? See? And it's coming and says, okay, this is a positive score on this text, right? It's a beautiful day because I just lost all my
Hmm.
money. See? It's a false positive, right? Because, okay, I'm
Hmm.
being sarcastic about it, but because the artificial intelligence looks into it and says and sees beautiful day, right? It says, yeah, you must be talking about something really positive because you're talking about beautiful and whatever, right? So it depends. That's why we're kind of giving them these kind of, let's say, pointers. If you're having a conversation, try to speak more than 20, 30 seconds at least, or at least, I don't know, have at least 50 words or something like that. Because even if you're doing sarcasm at a certain point, and these kind of isolated cases, they will balance at a certain point, right? Because look, even if I'm doing this positive sentence right here, which is clearly a false positive, right? Then if I'm speaking in a normal manner, at a certain point it will balance, right? Because what you're going to do is to take all the sentences and you're going to do, I don't know, some kind of probably uh, some kind of balance between all of them. This will be 75% positive. This will be 76% positive, and so on and so forth. And then at the end of the day, you're just gonna do the math behind it, and you're going to say the whole text is 50% lost, right? But again, has pros and cons. It's up to usually our customers to decide how they want to play those. We're making the disclaimers because, as I said, I don't want to sugarcoat it, and it's not just from Microsoft. Even if you use it from Google, even if you use it from Amazon, all of these artificial intelligence, especially for speech to text and especially for sentiment analysis, are not there yet to understand human language as we understand it, because it has all kinds of caveats, right? And the best example, as I've already shown you, is that sarcasm, yeah, something that artificial intelligence doesn't yet really understand. Last but not least,
it's
okay. Yes.
gonna be how complex the model becomes, right? Like the way you train that, it's gonna be
Sure.
adapting to that, right?
Yeah, so you can build complex models.
I mean, the reason why I'm saying that I'm really interested. I'm really interested in this because I've worked with the call centers in the past, and I've worked as a
Yeah,
data analyst, and we've worked with several clients on the telcos and the utility companies, call center data, and then we provide them reporting. So this is something, an interesting use case where you could do speech to text, and then sort of provide them with sentiment analysis, and
yep.
more complex sentiment analysis would, I think, would increase a lot of value.
Yeah, and you can do it. As I said, this one that you're seeing here is literally the most simplest off-the-shelf thing that you can get from Microsoft, but you can train your own own artificial intelligence, in which you're basically providing the data that you're training, right? And then it gives you a preliminary result. But after that preliminary result, you can actually tweak it. You can go into the artificial intelligence and say, hey, this one you've actually identified as incorrect. This is not positive. This is negative. And the more data and the more training you do to that model, of course, the more customized it will be, and the more accurate to your use case it will be, right? So you can do that, of course, but it's, as I said, it's a different process, and it usually takes longer time, let's put it like that, right? Because you have to come with your own data, and you have to literally hold the hand of the artificial intelligence to tell them what to analyze and how to analyze. Yeah, but it can be done, so for sure. Anyways, as I said, right, because we were talking about languages, let me demonstrate also the other languages. Probably forgot to demonstrate you guys those. So I'm gonna speak very rubbishly in the other two languages, just for the sake of demonstration. Let's try French first, just to demonstrate it. Je m'appelle Marcel et j'habite en Paris. Let's see if it works. Okay. Basically, I was trying to say that my name is Marcel and I'm living in Paris, which apparently kind of works,
Okay,
more or
that's
less.
interesting. Okay.
Right?
I think we have a few more minutes, and then we can
Yeah.
wrap this up.
Yes, that's true. But the thing that I want to leave you guys with, because I'm almost done, is the list of languages that are being supported, right, for speech to text. So you can see here a long list of languages and even dialects, right? So you've probably seen that I've chosen Spanish at a certain point in there, right? This one. But if you want to make use of the Spanish that is being, I don't know, spoken in Ecuador, for example, or in Dominican Republic or whatever, there are basically other code languages for that, right? And they're literally all of the languages that you can think of, more or less, right? From Hindi to Hebrew to Galician to whatever, right? It's literally a long list. It not applies just for speech to text. It applies also for text analytics and sentiment analysis. So let's see, Azure sentiment analysis, language support. Right here. In which, again, based on codes, right, you have a lot of languages that you can actually use. I'm going to give you the links, right, so that you guys can show it, that you guys can see it for yourselves, right? So I'll paste them in the chat. But yeah, that's basically it. So we've kind of demonstrated this. We have one more minute, most probably. So if you guys have questions, I'll gladly respond to them.
I think that's about it. I think.
Okay, but
Mm.
in case you do
Thanks,
guys have
thanks a
questions.
lot.